I think it's more you should be that as a standard. And I think if the smaller companies are not doing it, then the big companies are never going to do it. But I think we do about 2.5 million bottles a month. Anything before 2022, it was the world was your oyster. Evaluations were crazy. You could easily raise so much money. I think the naivety kind of helped us and not really think about that too much. We found someone in North London who had a homemade machine kind of, and so we just hand bottled glass that we bought off Amazon, or I mean, like, not a professional. And I want to have code for Double Dutch, and how that is, I don't really mind. I just want to be part of that journey and keep Double Dutch going.
Raissa, how are you?
I'm very good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. How's the start of your year going?
Been very good, very exciting,
good,
busy.
Amazing. Well, I'm excited to speak about the last 10 years of your life, which must feel like quite a long time, the time you've been building Double Dutch and everything you've been up to. But before we do that, I kind of wanted to go back to childhood. And now, obviously, you've built a business with your twin and your sister, so I'm sure we'll speak a lot about her. But growing up, what was growing up like for you? What kind of environment was that like?
A very happy childhood.
Yeah, amazing.
It's just me and my sister, so no other siblings, which is good because otherwise they would have been left out. And we grew up in the Netherlands, super nice. With nice parents and
perfect. And what did your parents do? What kind of, were they normal jobs, or were they doing anything different?
They always had their own companies, nice. And they started in, they did import-export of antiques business when we were really young. And then they sold that company, and then they went into kind of all sorts of things in between, like jeans and shampoos and various things in between. And then went into real estate and kind of stayed in real estate.
So entrepreneurs as a whole. Yeah. Were you were you and your sister involved in any of the sort of family stuff that they would do as business owners as well? Or was it a bit more like it was their work?
Not really, but we have always been kind of a family where we talked lots about kind of money or issues or kind of cash or those kind of things from when we were super young. So I think that has... Our father always said, like, you should never start your own company. You should make all the... not in the beginning. You should start your own company, but not start as soon as we actually did. Because you should make all your mistakes with an employer, get some learnings and with someone else, because he also never worked for someone else and started super young his own business. And so he said you should really do that. Make all the mistakes with someone else, and then you start your own business. But we didn't do that.
Because you and your sister, I mean, I remember I've seen somewhere that you were talking about the fact that you were kind of young budding entrepreneurs in some way, selling flowers and corn and all those variables. Was that always a part of you and your twin, wanting to do that and being a bit inspired by your parents, or where did that come about?
I think we were always, because we were always kind of, I don't know, not very... I think because our parents teach us, like, do stuff. I mean, when we grew up, long time ago, there wasn't like iPads and stuff, right? So I think we just found stuff to do, and we traded, like, I don't know, we went and searched corn on a field and then sold it in a little lemon store, or we made indeed, like the paper flowers, good research, and sold them to like our neighbors and stuff. And I think for us it was fun because it was kind of the value of getting €1 or €2 and then being able to go to a candy shop and buy your own candy. It was more kind of for like the little monies or something.
Yeah, no, definitely. For you and your sister, like, obviously you're twins, and I think everyone assumes twins are kind of joined at the hip. I'm sure people think the same of you guys because you are, but what was that kind of environment like for you growing up in terms of always having a twin, sharing everything, going through that? Was that ever a challenging part, or were you always just really getting on?
I always loved being a twin. Yeah. And indeed, people say like, oh, the challenge is that you don't have your own identity and you get always seen as one. But we never really had that issue. I think we just thought it was good fun, and kind of we grew up being each other's best friend, and didn't have any other siblings to kind of take into account. So not really. I also don't really mind, for example, if people
can't tell us apart, or if people call me Joyce, or I don't mind. It's just
that's nice.
Yeah, we are.
Because I mean, you were so close that you went to the same university together, pretty much. Like, was that by fate, or was that very much planned out?
It was more kind of because we just had the same interests.
Oh, really?
And for example, for London, when we moved from, so we kind of did similar studies in bachelor and master, similar, not exactly the same in Antwerp. Mm-hmm. And then we moved to London to study second master here. Yeah. And we applied both for 3 universities. And we thought, okay, we're never going to be accepted by the same one. So this is our time where our journey separates. But then we got both accepted for our number one choice. So then we thought, okay, we have to stay together.
And for you, I guess more as an individual now, were you growing up, obviously you've got a bit of an entrepreneurial family, amazing relationship with your sister. Were you a goal setter? Were you someone that really had a kind of a plan of where you wanted to get to from a career perspective? Or were you very much just flowing with what happens in life?
Not really so much a goal setter, I think. Yeah. But always a good student.
Okay.
Not so much because I was like it just kind of came quite naturally, which was nice. But I think I always had in my mind, like, I want to be doing something that I really enjoy. I never really, for example, like when people talk about work-life balance, I always thought that's really quite sad if you really have to separate it. And I always thought you have to do something that you really like in your work. But never really thought about this is what I'm going to do, or this is where I want to be when I'm... It's kind of just all a bit of...
Because before you came to London, you had a small job. You both went into finance for a period of time just before you came over,
very
right?
short, 3 months.
So tell me about that, because that feels like a bit of tasting and trying something and knowing it doesn't work at all. So
I always thought that finance is super... I had this kind of romantic image about finance, and that it was like this, I don't know... like in a movie where it's quite clever, so I don't know. It's not. Or I mean, not when you're just out of university. But I studied finance.
Yeah.
And so when I graduated, I just always thought the natural thing to do is to go in kind of banking world. And so I started in private wealth management.
Yeah.
And then just 3 months later, I just thought, well, there must be more fun things in life. And Joyce, she went into banking, corporate banking, with a big bank in Brussels. And she also thought, this is also not a really...
Was it just because it was such a basic 9-to-5, less create? What was it about it that you didn't like?
I thought it was just a bit boring. It wasn't really exciting. Same kind of similar days. And Joyce, but she had that more than, because I was in a really small firm and Joyce was in this big company. She felt like there was very much a career progression. If you do well, but you're not, you have 1 year and you need to do this, then you can go to the next steps. 2 years are the next steps. Even if you do amazing, that 2 year can never be 1 year. Like those strict kind of parameters. She found that super frustrating and thought that's never going to work. So I think it's more kind of the in the box, or
just confined, and not really something that's going to push you, especially I guess when you're a little bit younger and you can take some more risks and do things different.
And then you don't have to give up a big job, or I mean, there's no risk really to
So you came to London to join UCL, and within that's the program that you were both doing at the time, which led to kind of the birth of what you have in Double Dutch today, right? Tell me that little bit of a journey, because it feels like there's a little story there.
So I studied finance, went into finance, absolutely hated it, quit my job, and then thought, what do we do now?
Yeah.
And then we always kind of loved London because it's so close to the Netherlands, but it's this big international city. And so I always thought I really, really want to live in London, but then... okay, probably wasn't going to happen. But then did it like finance. And I thought, okay, why don't I apply for a university to just do a second master or something, a year or something in London? And so that's why we came to London. And so started at UCL, which was a 1-year master in tech entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
And the idea of that was, I thought the entrepreneurship part really interested me because I did kind of very technical, kind of more mathematics at uni, and it was super kind of
on paper and not practical at all. And I thought that entrepreneurship, then it would be more kind of a practical course, which was amazing. And so the idea actually of that master was devote your year about a startup in fintech. It was more fintech related, but we skipped that part.
So spend the year developing a fintech idea.
Exactly. And then the courses were, for example, finance, but then finance very much related to startups. So how to raise investment, how to set up your cap table, kind of that. Then brand and marketing was very much about, during that course, and your end project in brand and marketing was, how does your marketing or brand plan look like for your fintech startup? So the whole course over the year was very much related to, you should focus it on one project.
Yeah.
And so we came to London and we thought, we've always had a passion for drinks. And growing up, our parents always organized every last Friday of the month tasting parties with champagnes or wines or tequilas or vodkas. And so we joined those and liked those. And during our university in Antwerp, we actually always used to make our own sodas. So when we went to house parties, people brought a bottle of gin or a bottle of tequila or whatever, and we would bring our homemade sodas, which we just enjoyed, never thought about doing anything serious with it. But so we came to London and we thought, wow, that hospitality industry here is so much further ahead than back in Belgium and the Netherlands. And bartending is a real career here. Gin and tonic is a proper staple. And we just thought, wow, that drinks industry here is so much more buzzing than back home. And so we also university, can't we skip the fintech? Because actually finance, maybe really not a thing. Can't we do it about something that we're really passionate about if we're going to do a whole year about one subject? Can't we do it about the drinks industry? And they said, yeah, you should absolutely do it about something that you think you will actually pursue afterwards. So then my concept of my dissertation and my year was the fact that gins were massively booming and you had this whole flavor innovation in gins.
Because this is like 2013.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 20. And so you had like the crazy gin boom with the different flavors and big highball glasses with lots of garniture.
Yeah.
And lots of premiumization in spirits in general. But that super complementary product that is mixers and tonic waters was kind of not in the same growth line, wasn't in the same innovation line. You had your kind of standard tonic waters like Schweppes and Britvic, and Fever-Tree was just kind of becoming on the scene, but they were still very much focused on just a premium Indian tonic and just a premium ginger beer. They didn't do any flavors or anything. And so that was my concept for the year, and then graduated with the concept of Double Dutch, which was more flavorful mixers, lower in calories, better for the planet, more transparency, right whole production, and also very much focused on not just gin, but also to make cocktails with vodka or tequila or rums.
Yeah.
And then our university, UCL, gave us a prize for best thesis of the year, and they gave us our initial investment to start the company. And to get that funding, one of the requirements was to stay in the UK and use that funding here in the UK. And so that's the reason why we stayed here and started.
I read somewhere that at university they called you the Tonic Twins.
Yeah.
Is that right?
That's right.
Were you ever going to call the brand the Tonic Twins out of interest? Was it always like, where did I obviously
never thought about it?
I just, because I saw that come up a few times about the Tonic Twins, which I think is hilarious as a little like university thing. But then going with Double Dutch, what made you go with that brand name?
We were
the obvious reasons there, but why go with it?
We were really struggling during our dissertation. We were really struggling with a brand name. Never thought about Tonic Twins, actually. Should have thought about it. I think my holding name was horrible, Liz Soda or something, because there was something about an Elizabeth, I can't even remember.
Liz.
Yeah, Liz,
yeah,
L-I-Z, ridiculously bad. And we had all kinds of bad holding names. And then we had a drunk night out, and someone said for a joke, you should call it Double Dutch. And then the next morning we woke up, didn't remember a lot, apart from Double Dutch. And we thought, okay, there's a ring to it.
It's a great name. Yeah. It's really cool. So that initial investment, obviously starting out in the UK, so you finish at UCL, and then once you finish the year, you go in to try to make this startup a reality.
Yeah.
Where do you start at that point? Because I think the story that a lot of people know, I think you make it sound very easy, but knowing where to start on that process, you've obviously had a bit of breathing space with being at UCL and be able to develop things which some people don't get. They're building businesses on the side, whatever it might look like, right? So what's the first step for you that you guys went about? Were you going to raise more money? Was it getting product out there? Where did you start?
So our first step was to get product so that we could start selling or trialing it with customers. And that kind of to get the product, that was quite a long process, or I think took us about 6 months or something, because especially back then, the drinks industry was very much centered around very big companies. And I think now it's definitely better. And now with the whole craft movement over the past 8 years, there's lots of ways to produce smaller quantities now. Yeah. But back then, I remember when we went to every filling plant or every kind of the glass bottle or the label suppliers or the crown caps that close your caps, like the different kind of raw materials, everything was minimum order quantities, 100,000 units, 1 million units, 500. Wow. So absolutely out of order. Yeah, crazy.
Because now you can get something for 1,000
Exactly.
units.
Now it's quite easy, actually. But back then, it just didn't really exist, those smaller fillers or things. So we found someone in North London who had a homemade machine, kind of something probably not totally up to standard, via. And he said, okay, you can come to my house, basically, or he had a little kind of garage.
Yeah.
And if you want, you can produce there on Saturday and Sundays when I'm not producing my own stuff.
As in you go.
Yeah, we did that ourselves and my boyfriend. And so we just hand bottled glass that we bought off Amazon, or like not a professional filler. And we filled every, I think, 6 nights or something over the weekend.
That's the fun bit of building a brand, though, right?
Exactly.
Like, you look back now and it's probably hilarious. At the time, you're probably like, somewhat naive, somewhat like, what are we walking into? You don't really have the stresses of building a brand on your. Do you remember those sort of nights quite well?
Yeah, I do. I think it's super fun, but I did think at the time, like, this is so absolutely unscalable. If it works, what are we gonna do? Because yeah.
So you are always thinking a little bit further ahead in that
a little bit
to be like, what's going on?
But we hadn't sold a bottle, so
right.
Really.
So at that point, you're just trying to get product to then go and have the conversations with, and because today you don't really have a huge retail business. A lot of it's for hospitality. So was that the goal in the first stages of building the brand, and what was the objective of the brand at that time?
So we always wanted to do hospitality as a core business and not to grocery retail, because I really believe in brands being built in hospitality so that consumers can experience it in the kind of best environment, with a bartending explaining it in a perfect serve, in a nice glass with right ice cubes, rather than launching in retail. You're kind of dependent on the consumer doing their serves, however. And if you get one bad experience, you're never going to win that customer back. So I think we were always very much focused, okay, hospitality is it. And we wanted to stay focused on super premium. And so when we had that first 6,000 bottles, we just...
6,000?
Yeah.
You made 6,000?
We made 6,000 bottles.
Wow. It's a lot of bottles to make by hand.
Yeah, exactly. Our car could fit 400 bottles. So it was a lot of back and forth.
12 trips.
Yeah. Wow. So we just with those samples, we just knocked on doors and we said, okay, we need to visit at least 12 customers per day. And so we just we first started in Mayfair and visited all cocktail bars, and then all 5-star hotels, and then all kind of premium restaurants. And then we went to Soho. We did the same there. And I think that is probably, then it becomes a little bit more real. But then you have to get those first customers on board, and obviously it's like you're selling a Bible, right? It's like, hello, I have my name. I'm selling a tonic water. Yeah. Is your gem here? Nobody's really interested. But then you get so many no's, and then you get the first yes. Or
do you remember the first yes you personally got?
Yeah, I do.
Do you know who it was?
Yeah, it was in Mayfair, kind of a rooftop. It doesn't exist anymore, I think. And he said, like, I'll give you a chance and I'll stock it. Yeah. I'll put it on a cocktail. And then he gave us super kindly. I have a mate in the Dorchester and a mate who works there. And he gave us like 5 or 6 good friends of his who he said, I'll call them that you are passing by, and you can pass by with my regards.
That's amazing.
And that was super kind. And then I think a few of them stocked us, and they did the same. And from then onwards, we kind of always asked, can you help us with other things?
Because it's about momentum, right? You mentioned like early stages, driving around your car. Like that's where most amazing, particularly F&B brands have kind of started. You know, even if you're talking about the huge ones now and brands like yourself have started. Dealing with the no's for you early on, how did you guys as a team, I guess you and your sister, deal with that? Was it a little bit like, it's tough, right? It's not easy to go through like, no, we don't need it, we don't want it. Like how did you process that as a team?
We started that was so much from a passion, kind of. Right. We really want to try this, and we really believe that there was such an opportunity in the mixer market for more flavorful mixers. Yeah. That we just we didn't really think about the no's or the consequences of having too many no's that at some point you kind of have to give up. Yeah. I think we just didn't really think about it. Yeah, there was also not a lot to lose. We didn't really have a job. So never really thought about it.
Do you know how long it took you to kind of start getting momentum as a brand? So from those 6,000 bottles, if you're doing 12 a day, 12 sites or locations even a day, to kind of start to get some momentum in the brand, did it take quite a while, or did you feel that it really connected with people quite quickly?
I think we got some... I think the volumes that came out of it, because we launched with our cucumber watermelon and our pomegranate and basil, so 2 very different flavors. They were always going to be an addition on a cocktail menu, rather than now we have, for example, an Indian tonic that does a lot more volume because it goes into every gin and tonic, or the ginger beer goes into every Moscow Mule, for example. Sure. But on the side, so I think we got our first few customers, I think 10, 20 customers on board in the first, I think 2 months or something. So we were quite happy with that. But then revenue-wise, that kind of translated into 0. It was very low. But I think for us, the first time that we thought, okay, now we're getting really momentum is when we were about 6 months old or something. So I think half a year. We entered this competition from Richard Branson, the Foodpreneur Award. I think they stopped doing that actually. But
that's a Virgin Award.
The Virgin, yeah. And we won that award for most innovative food and beverage brand. And with that, we got all of a sudden lots of press in kind of the Evening Standard and the Times. And we had a picture with Richard Branson, and lots of the media took that over. And then for some reason, we just got lots of momentum from that. And then all of a sudden, some buyers started calling us up and said, I read about you in the newspaper. Can you pass by? And I think people started thinking that we were a lot bigger than we were at that point. And that kind of gave us a really good kind of stepping stone.
Yeah. Because I think everyone thinks a lot about PR, right? From like a brand perspective, you're like, right, we need to get all the classic listings and spend a fortune on PR. But it feels like what you're saying is it happened a bit more naturally as well for you, because obviously you've got an award. You've got a reason to be spoken about because of that award piece. Is that right?
Yeah, I do really believe in PR.
Really?
But not so much actually in advertisement than on the other side. I do think, for example, getting an article or an interview versus putting in ads, I think is so much more valuable. Yeah. But it's difficult because what's new news, and they're only going to write if there is something happening, and yeah.
Something's going on. Sometimes a new product announcement isn't really
exactly
news, you know. Yeah. What's the angle? I saw a few images of the brand when you first launched it and what it looked like, and it kind of has the same look and feel today. It's obviously elevated and refreshed a little bit, if I'm right in saying that. Branding and the way that brand comes across, you're obviously looking at building a premium brand. How did you guys approach the branding, and why has that been? It feels like it's been quite an important tool for you in the growth and the overall business growth as well. Is that right?
Definitely. I do think it's super important, but I think the liquid is the number one most important. Really? And especially because we are so hospitality focused, I think we're not that we are the first thing that you see on shelf is you see your packaging in retail. In hospitality, kind of the first thing that you see or taste is kind of the brand name on the menu, and then you get to taste it. So I think branding absolutely super important. We did do quite a lot of changes in the early beginnings when we just launched. We launched a lot earlier than we were planning to launch because we ran out of money, and London is an expensive place to fair it. So we said, okay, we just have to start selling because otherwise we have to go back to Netherlands. And so we launched with a product that we knew our labels were kind of horrible, and our product wasn't really, I mean, it was almost there, but we knew that it could use some tweaks. Yeah. And so we launched, and then some of our customers said, we really like the product, but we need to find a way on how can we put this on our menu without people seeing the product, without people seeing the labels or the bottle, because it's so terrible. And so we thought, oh my God, that's really bad. Now we really have to do something about it. So then we did a kind of a bigger rebrand, and the not so much money that we had, we kind of spent into just changing that bottle and changing that labels. And that was a massive improvement. And then over COVID, we did a whole kind of rebrand again to incorporate more kind of vibrancy and colors and more of what our fans it's today.
Because a part of the brand is obviously the science, if you will, behind the pairings and all those elements. Was that always in the product when you first started, or was that something that developed as you went?
It's always been since the start.
Always been. Because that process, even when you're doing the 6,000 kind of bottles, right, at the time, how did you do that? Because that isn't your background and your sister's background, right?
So when we kind of that first 6 months up to launch to get kind of those first bottles, our two biggest challenges were how are we actually going to produce it and getting actual physical bottles. And then the other side was recipe development, because my sister and I, we made our own tonic waters and mixers for fun, but it's so different to just pressing a little bit of puree with some sparkling water versus putting like a proper shelf life and everything around it. So we then kind of via found a person who was a flavor developer, and he just retired and he wanted to help us out. And he basically helped he introduced us to the process of how to kind of the science behind it and then what flavors you should pair and how to work, but also with where can we source ingredients that are scalable and that actually work with a 18-month shelf life and that you can use in filling plants. And so he's helped us a lot.
Because as you start to scale up, keeping the science part and the product part, the quality there, is that challenging to do as you're starting to find scale? Because the products you're using, the ingredient list you're using, as you're saying, finding the sourcing, is that a huge challenge in scaling?
I think actually it becomes easier because in super small quantities, it's really difficult to find high quality ingredients. Yeah. But in larger quantities, it's actually, you have a lot more choice. Although that has changed over the past few years. But the struggle or the difficulty is consistency of supply. If you have, for example, a bad forming year in cucumbers, how do you keep your flavor exactly the same? Yeah,
it's difficult for you guys.
But we now work with great flavor developers, and so we don't, for example, we usually always work with a blend of fruit. So we never get, for example, our lemons from one place, but they come from large varieties. Yeah, exactly.
Nice. Yeah. How many years was it just the two of you?
I think 2 years.
Okay, fine. So in those 2 years, you kind of found some quite early success that allowed you to kind of start to grow. What was the first member of staff you brought into the team?
Finance. Although we both have finance backgrounds. Yeah.
Why finance?
Because we just thought we could better go out and do the selling and then do the storytelling and get people on board, customers on board. And finance was just kind of probably the first thing that's the easiest to give away. And then our second hire was marketing, someone to put some proper plans in place and do some real things. Yeah. And then our third hire was someone in sales to help us in the north of the UK.
Okay, got you. How was your and your sister's relationship in the kind of first 2 years? Because I'm sure it's quite a challenging environment to be sisters, super aligned, enjoying the process, but building anything is very difficult. So how did it work between the two of you? Was it always quite positive, or did you have your moments?
In general, it's always super positive, but we had and still have our moments. And we definitely stay sisters. So it does stay, it's quite emotional. Do you have siblings?
I do. Yeah.
So it's quite emotional. I mean, I'm never going to tell to Joyce in a polite way that I don't agree with her. I'll tell her,
pretty direct.
Are you crazy? Yeah. So I think that stays. And so therefore we do quite fight a lot because we don't have for example, my partner, he works with his father, and if they are in a personal environment, they are just father and son, and they are super kind of familiar. But if they work together in their kind of professional environment, then they are super professional together. And he names his father not Dad, but by his first name, and they're super professional. But Joyce and I, we are never kind of professional and personal life. We are always personal life. So yeah, it's definitely
Well, did that take some getting used to in the first couple of years? Because I guess going from, being sisters, going to university together, being friends, having relationships together, like, etc. You've done so much, similar friendship groups by the sounds of it, going to then, building and business and stakes are getting higher and those sorts of variables. Did you feel that you had to kind of adjust your relationship in a professional environment to make it work for the future kind of success?
So we never did that, so I don't think so.
Great. Yeah. I mean, it just worked. I mean, it just sounds like your relationship is so aligned, and you can obviously understand each other so much, because it is challenging to do. So it's to kind of do that in the process sounds amazing.
Yeah.
As you started to grow a team, was that something new for you? Obviously, managing people and starting to build a team and pushing the direction. How did you find that in the early stages?
I do think that is definitely one of the most difficult things of starting your own company. And because we both apart from the 3 months, never really worked in a corporate environment. I never really got to
even
have that.
Months,
exactly. Yeah. So we didn't really know, or never got that kind of example of this is how you lead in the right way or manage people in the right way, or how a good line manager has, for example, be with me or whatever.
Yeah.
So I think that is definitely a struggle. And I think especially in the beginning, when we were 24 years old and everyone we hired was at least 10 years older. So I think that is a struggle, but then I think with passion and drive, you get a long way.
I've been in that position where you kind of start to hire people who are a lot older than you, and you kind of feel quite insecure in yourself a little bit. How did you feel at that point, and how did you get over that?
Yeah, I think it's true. I think it's a struggle, right? I think it's just, I think you get people along with you with lots of passion and drive and sharing kind of how you see it. And I think we are probably not very traditional kind of managers, or how do you call it? But kind of more try and bring them along the journey.
Someone once says to me, when I started my business when I was 17, so I was starting to employ people in their 30s when I just hit my 20s, right? So it's a bit of a weird dynamic, but I remember saying it to someone who at the team who was working in one of the companies at the time. And I remember saying, like, it's one of the things I always get really insecure about is like the fact that you're just older than me. And he said something that really kind of stuck with me I won't remember exactly what he said, but it was something along the lines of like, the only person that really thinks about it is you, I'm in a lot of things about it. At that point, when someone is that age and they're a little bit older, they're not really caring as much. And the biggest thing is exactly what you said. As long as, you're trying to be the best version of you and the best manager, people don't really care as much. But it is one of those funny insecurities that we have, and you start to build businesses where you think that everyone really cares, and actually it doesn't really matter. It's more look at merit than age or anything like that, which is more important. As you guys started to grow from a funding perspective, were you sort of bootstrapping the brand and the business and kind of reinvesting in the growth?
And then we raised our first investment round quite early on.
Okay.
So I think about 14-15 months in.
Okay.
And we kind of knew then you have a few options like crowdfunding, or then kind of go with family, friends, or high net worth individuals. The crowdfunding part, we knew that we kind of wanted people on board that could help with, we both didn't really come from the drinks industry. So we wanted people from drinks industry on board to just help kind of with overall strategy or distribution or network or just some insights. So then we thought, okay, crowdfunding doesn't really work for us. Friends and family didn't really work for us because we also didn't know anyone in the UK. And so then kind of our solution was to go on LinkedIn and find investors there and approach people that...
Oh, you just went cold?
We went cold.
How much did you try and raise initially? Was it a large amount? Was it just to kind of keep...
I think our first raise was £250,000.
Okay. At the time, it's still a lot of it's a big raise in many ways. And what was that for? Was that to kind of get to the next level of growth?
Yeah, it was mostly very much to do a bigger production run and more kind of professional setup on production.
Yeah.
I think to hire more in sales, and then do some kind of digital marketing and trade shows and investing in POS material. And
do you think you raised at the right time for your first raise?
Yeah.
You kind of got it right. Because a lot of people seem, especially with COVID, and we were talking about this at the start, is like raising either at the wrong time, the wrong valuation, too early, too late. It seems to be quite a common thing that's discussed now. But for you, you're saying it was kind of well timed in the growth you needed.
I think anything before 2022, it was the world was your oyster. Evaluations were crazy. You could easily raise so much money. It was a good time to raise investment. Yeah. So anything before that was actually, it was,
yeah, a bit different.
Yeah, exactly.
The brand's obviously focused a lot on sustainability. How much has that always been a part of the DNA of what you wanted to build?
It was definitely part of kind of our core values from the start.
Yeah.
But then when COVID hit, the whole of hospitality closed, that really gave us a lot of time to really kind of strip back and look back at every kind of part in our supply chain. Where can we really improve? And we've made lots of changes over that period of COVID.
Yeah.
Because it just gave us the time and everyone in the team to think about their different departments.
Sure. Because by the time COVID hit, the brand was sort of 5 years old.
Yeah,
so it's kind of like matured in a way. Like you've probably moved away from the original plan and you've found some things that work and don't work. So it's quite a nice, not that COVID was a nice time, but like it's a good time to sort of reflect.
Yeah, exactly.
Is all you did.
Exactly. It was a good time. So we did some projects like, for example, sustainability, branding relaunch and change of visibility of our designs and stuff. So I think with the sustainability, kind of from COVID, we put kind of more structure in place also. Okay, what does it mean? What are our goals in every department? Kind of, we always look at every kind of decision that's now made, we think about the sustainable option and we look at, okay, what does it then impact onto, for example, our bottom line? And then we make a decision. But I think pre-COVID, it was a lot more loose and there weren't a lot of structures around it and everyone kind of just we looked at, for example, okay, our actual production, yes, but then maybe not much wider than that.
Yeah.
And now it's much more integrated in the whole business.
How obviously being sustainable is a huge part of like lots of brands now. For you, it's a value and that's so important. But from a consumer perspective, did you really feel that consumers were wanting more sustainability in the brand? And when I say consumers, your end customers, the hospitality sector, how big has it become, or is it more just you should be that as a standard?
I think it's more you should be that as a standard.
Yeah.
And I think if the smaller companies are not doing it, then the big companies are never going to do it. So I really do believe it's on all of us to make small changes and to set the right example.
Yeah. Because it's one of those things where, especially when you started in sort of 2015-ish, I just started my business a few years prior to it. And I remember a lot of new brands, particularly like vegan brands, had just started coming out, with vegan leathers and those sorts of things, as sustainable brands, and loads of different sectors were looking at this sort of sustainability aspect. And it felt like the end consumer was paying for that, if you will. And now, and I've had some other people on the show that have, looked at sustainable brands, and it feels like it should just be a part of your brand now in 2025, as opposed to the consumer needs to pay in order to be sustainable, if that makes sense. Like that feels like the shift that's happened. Does that feel aligned?
Yeah, I think it's kind of hygiene. It's part of, you can't really use it as a USP, or it's the same as I use all natural ingredients. Yeah, it's kind of normal. Exactly. Yeah, great. It's kind of part of the basics now.
Yeah. No, definitely. For you, obviously, the market was growing and Double Dutch was offering something that's different to the space. It's still competitive and it's always been quite competitive. How in the early stages were you approaching that competitiveness? How were you cutting through in the market?
I think we probably didn't really think about it so much.
Right.
Yeah. We just were, I think that's really early stage. We were just super confident in having a different product. We were the first brand that had double flavored mixers that were quinine free, that were focused on making cocktails really easy rather than just a gin and tonic. So we just, I think the naivety kind of helped us and not really think about that too much. And then kind of
just focused on you, is that what you're saying?
Exactly. We just focused on our product and didn't really look at anyone else. And then kind of along the way while selling, people said like, oh, what I really like about your story is the two of you, and that you have that you actually started it kind of from university, and kind of bits and pieces that we now point out a lot more than other parts in your story. And so I think along the way, it kind of, we kind of started understanding what people liked about it and maybe didn't really care so much. Or for example, the fact that it's made with molecular pairings, nobody really couldn't care less. And so we kind of...
Did you think they would care?
We thought everyone would care.
Really?
Bartenders and mixologists to be super much into kind of how it was made, but nobody really cares. So
they just care about the taste.
Exactly,
right?
It doesn't taste good
to the science.
Exactly,
but they don't care how it's got there.
And how it's there. It doesn't matter. It just needs to taste good and good quality ingredients. And so we kind of skipped that part in then our pitches, and kind of along the way, we highlighted some stuff.
Do you think that generally brands and maybe others in different industries care too much about competition in terms of what everyone else is doing, and should maybe just focus a bit more on themselves? Because it feels like that's what you guys did, and it's obviously worked, but it's so easy to care about what the person, you could care really loads about Fever Tree, for example, who I know obviously similar space to you, but actually just focusing on you feels like the best way to go about it.
I think I think you have to focus on you, because otherwise you spend so much time on just looking at the others. But I think, of course, it's useful to look at, for example, how competitors have built it in their early days, or where they are focused. I think we very much focused a lot on where does, for example, Fever Tree, where do they operate really well, and where is their kind of super core loyal audience, where we were also targeting in hospitality, and where were they maybe not giving as much love, where we could easier convince people to work with another brand. So I think looking at competition is definitely useful, but more kind of with an idea on where the opportunity lies.
Not we need to make the exact same measure of them, and they've done this, we should be doing that, and kind of the jealousy kind of ruins the growth in some ways, doesn't it? The growth's been pretty amazing. I mean, how many bottles? You do about 2 million bottles a month. Is that still the same number, or has that kind of gone up?
A little bit more. But I think we do about 2.5 million bottles a month.
Wow. I mean, that's from the 6,000 you originally made to now. Scaling to that point, obviously growing anything is very difficult, and the team is now 20 plus people. The production line is completely different. I know you've got multiple products and SKUs. What have you found the hardest part about growing?
That's a difficult question. I think
there's probably lots of areas.
Yes, that's good question. I think cash flow is always kind of an issue, I think, or kind of the most important thing. Cash is king. I think team is definitely also difficult, and I think especially in those early days, trying to afford someone that you think you need, but you can't actually afford them, then you kind of outgrow, especially in those first few years where we were doubling our revenue each year, then you kind of hire for a finance person for that moment in time. But then a year later, you've kind of also outgrown each other. Then you need to relook at that again. I think we made lots of mistakes there into hiring for that moment in time instead of hiring for the future and thinking, what do we need in 3 years' time? What does that look like in the finance part? What does that look like in marketing, brand, in sales? So I think just looking more ahead, I would definitely do that differently if I would start again. And for example, hire more senior people on a part-time basis rather than hiring junior people full-time. I think sometimes is
brands often make that mistake, don't they? Particularly in kind of F&B and consumer goods, really. There's a lot of kind of like big junior teams thinking that we need hands on deck, and actually it's sometimes the quality of the hands
exactly
more, right? Did you experience that?
Definitely. And I think we had over the past 10 years, we had kind of both structures where at some point we just only had kind of slightly more junior people where there wasn't really any management team, and then it just doesn't work because I'm also not the person then for everyone to kind of manage. So then it kind of went into a bit of chaos. But then on the other hand, after that, we then hired lots of kind of mid-level senior people. And then all of a sudden, we were a team of almost only senior people. And then there were no doers. So that doesn't work. So I think there is a fine balance, which we're still searching for. So I think that's definitely difficult. Yeah.
And how do you feel you've kind of attract talent? You know, how have you built the team you have today? I'm sure you've got some amazing individuals in there to build such a successful brand. But how have you been able to attract the talent? Has it been the brand? Has it been, what's the biggest thing you think?
I think team is so important, and we're super lucky with the team that we have at the moment. I think it's probably brand.
Yeah.
And I think being a bit more young, vibrant, kind of a younger company that's not anti-corporate, but slightly that, I do think attracts people.
Because even for the senior team, the people that maybe had an interesting career to date and worked with more established brands, whatever it might be, I think it's always trying to understand what they want, because that leads me on to my next question about how you now manage people versus how you managed people when you bought on your first time.
Not different enough.
But what's your style, and what have you found that's worked with managing such an interesting team of different people? 20 plus people is still a lot of people to kind of be managing between you, and I know your sister does a part of that as well. But how has your kind of style developed as the brand's grown?
I've become to have a lot more patience.
Yeah.
And I think in the beginning, I thought everything has to happen right now. And why don't we do it now? Otherwise, I'll do it myself. I think I've become much more better in it just takes time, and Rome wasn't built in a day. And we just have to be patient and just kind of build those kind of corner blocks to just have the right pace. And I think what's super important is I would never ask anyone to do anything that I wouldn't do myself, in small stuff, but also in bigger stuff. And just be super hands-on with the team. And
in terms of when you say you wouldn't ask anyone to do something you wouldn't do yourself, is that very much kind of literally in terms of trying new things, difficult challenges, bigger tasks, investor, like all those sorts of variables?
Stupid stuff like cleaning up an event after, or doing the boring administrative tasks, or
really being part of the team.
Yeah.
How have you guys, and I'm interested to kind of understand, between you and your sister, you both do sort of two parts of the business, and that's kind of playing into your strengths. Is that right?
Yeah. So we are super separate. So I do everything with sales, marketing and branding. And then Joyce does everything with finance, operations and export. So it's super split.
And in terms of the decision-making and the growth, like the kind of process to delivering that, are you very much, obviously you trust each other, but like, how do you guys operate that in terms of working with each other and saying, look, we're going in this direction because this is my field, but I still want to hear the opinions?
So we really have very much our separate kind of areas, and I have my regular meetings with everyone in my team, and Joyce has her regular meetings with everyone in her team, but actually Joyce and I never have a regular meeting. So I do it's actually a good thing to think about, so I'm going to change that.
This sounded a bit interesting.
Should we? But because we see each other a lot, so I do think she does know kind of what's going on in my department and in marketing. And we have our team meetings where she's part of it, of course. And I join kind of the monthlies of her, kind of the monthly strategy sessions of her, for example, export or finance sessions. And she joins those monthlies on marketing or sales. But other than that, we do our own thing in our own departments.
Has that ever been challenging for you? Because obviously you're going to have opinions, right? And you're going to want to have a say, and it's going to be the other way around. So right, if I push too far, she's probably going to push too far the other way next time. But that must be challenging in some time, especially when you were growing.
I think because we are so much together, what I think we do a lot is we talk throughout the day consistently. So I think we probably maybe involve each other too often still, because we talk throughout the day kind of. I was on holiday and I had my second phone and I checked like one day WhatsApp on our double dutch with the two of us. And I had 160 text messages between us, and I was on holiday. So I think we talk so much that I think we both feel super involved in each other's kind of departments. But more kind of the, what do you think I should do there? And therefore we are quite in the know of each other's.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting from like the way that it feels. I mean, when you say double Dutch, I literally just see these like two sort of columns in my head, but it feels like that's the structure internally. But I wonder, the question I now have is, for the team, do they feel like there's two pretty split out parts of the way you guys operate? Is that sort of the structure that it can feel like?
There is.
Is that ever quite challenging for the team themselves? Because obviously for you guys, you're always talk forever, but do you ever experience kind of, there is that side of the business and this side, and there's kind of, you know, two sides as opposed to being quite synergized
I like
together?
that. I think probably there slightly is, because finance and ops kind of sit together, and then sales and marketing kind of sit together, and they naturally don't really interact as much as kind of sales and marketing would do than sales and finance, for example, or ops. So I think the benefit is it's super clear who do you go to for what. If, for example, our head of sales has a question about margins or pricing or production, they go to Joyce.
Yeah.
If they have a question about an account or about activation support or about, I don't know, a customer in particular, they go to me. But I can see where you're coming from. I'm going to think about it.
Just purely interesting. Wasn't criticizing. After 10 years, you know, I think you mentioned very briefly that some years you were sort of doubling revenues year on year. But after 10 years, what do you think has been the most kind of the biggest impact and maybe the biggest key, if you will, to be so successful after 10 years? Because some brands don't last for 2 years, let alone 10 years. And to keep that consistency and growth, has there been something in your approach that's really led to that, you know, firstly lasting so long, but also not just being the same brand you were 10 years ago? What's really driven that kind of consistent momentum forward?
That's a super tough question. I don't know if I think it's kind of the basics of having being super confident in the product.
Yeah.
I think being super focused on also being able to say no to other opportunities. And over the past 10 years, we've had so many kind of opportunities to go into, for example, spirits or RTDs, or going into kind of more lifestyle. And
so
I think
bagpie effect of
just focus on, we have so much to do in the premium mixer segment, and that's our core channels, and that's where we really, really kind of want to build the brand and not being distracted by other stuff.
Yeah.
And even in kind of the channel where you operate, hospitality is so much of our channel. Yes, retail, if on our terms, will definitely, I think, in the future. But I think so far, hospitality is our better and better, and that's where we really want to win. And being focused on that and not going into the lower end part of the market where sometimes volumes are, but just being super kind of true to the vision and positioning. And
because you mentioned patience earlier on as kind of one of the really key parts of, I think, what you define as the success of the business. But it feels like after 10 years, that's a lot of patience.
It's a lot of patience, I know.
It's you know, it's not a sprint as such, and I know it's a very cliche thing to say, but it feels like your consistency year on year has really started to build that momentum across the board in many ways. There's a part of the business which is the female bartending program. I just want to hear a bit more about that and the kind of passion behind it.
So I think that's been really a passion project of Joyce and I. And I think sustainability isn't just about the environment. And I think it's also, for example, about the people and community. And so in 2020, we organized our female bartender scholarship for the first year. And so we're now going into a 5th year, which is very exciting.
Is that in COVID?
In COVID, yeah.
Oh, wow.
But we said, I think that we kind of started planning on it, I think, end of 2019, and then launched in 2020. So when we thought we were going to launch, we thought it was going to be not COVID. But then it turned out completely different. But we just wanted to do, I think if you ask kind of where does kind of success come from, I do think it comes down to 5 or 6 people in our lives that have helped us in some way or another, or through an introduction, or kind of helping us give some business or I don't know. I really do believe that it comes from people.
Yeah.
And so we just wanted to give something back. And I think the hospitality industry in general is so difficult for women in particular, to really drive a career because of obviously the logical reasons. Once you start having a family, then the hours in hospitality are just really difficult, and there's a lot more challenges and struggles for a woman in hospitality than there are for men. Although I do think 10 years ago, none of our buyers were female, and now I think 30-40% of the senior people who we, for example, tender to or pitch to or we need to convince are now more and more women. So I do think there has been such a positive change. But so we run a 12-week program for 10 to 15 women each year in kind of up-and-coming talent in the hospitality industry, where we help them to develop their skills in pure bartending skills, so like mixology or perfect serves, but also do modules of, for example, personal development, what are career changes after, for example, bartending, becoming a brand ambassador, or going to brand side, or opening your own bar, or doing consultancy, freelance.
Wow.
And so it's kind of split in personal and professional development, and it's amazing. And we have a really great community of scholars over the past few years. And this year is the first year that we're also involving our export countries. So some of our more international, so it used to always be UK, but then this year we're bringing some of our export countries. So very exciting.
That's amazing. What's been the hardest part about building Double Dutch for you?
That it's not fast enough.
Is that actually, does that sometimes kind of irritate? I know we talk about a lot of patience for you, but it feels like particularly you and your sister, it's always trying to, move forward at an amazing pace. But there must be times where you're like, yeah, we're being really patient, but there also must be times where, my business is 11 years old. I definitely know the feeling personally where you kind of look back and you feel like you're moving fast then, but then you do get impatient with yourself. Do you experience that?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think 10 years is such a long time. I think if you asked me 10 years ago, I mean, I didn't really think about 10 years back then, but I don't know. It's different, right?
Yeah. It's not what you would expect.
Yeah.
But sorry, you were saying the kind of hardest challenges for you have been.
I think the hardest challenge probably has been team,
right.
And building really that right team in place, which we have now, but I think in the past definitely been a struggle. And I think the benefit as well as the challenge with the mixer market is we are part of almost only, all our competitors are almost only corporates, public companies, huge massive companies. And if you look at gins or vodkas or more spirits or most drinks categories, there is a lot of craft players as well as the big corporates. But in mixers and premium mixers in particular, there are basically only corporates really playing in the field. So we are the only smaller independent brand actually competing with the bigger ones. So I think that has its benefits, absolutely, but also its challenges of we will never be able to do the listing fees of millions of pounds or whatever. I mean, it is.
You've always
bar by bar.
Fight. Is there ever been a part of you where you've wanted to kind of change that? I guess so. For you guys, maybe my next question is, the purpose of building the brand, has it been a build to sell thing? Is it what's been the kind of mission for the business, I guess, for you guys?
We never built to sell. We kind of built it because we believed there was a gap in the market and there should be flavorful mixers. And kind of, so we never really thought about that end game. I mean, we never really had a business plan or anything like that. But I think the way that the market is moving, there is kind of rationalization. And for example, retailers wanting to rationalize their suppliers and get their mixers and waters and gins from one supplier rather than having to go with all different suppliers.
Right.
So I do think if that trend keeps kind of putting itself through, then I do think there is a benefit of becoming a part of a bigger company for the sake of growing Double Dutch better in a wider distribution channel. So
I guess your focus then is to make sure Double Dutch continues to serve. But it doesn't matter not necessarily what format or business structure or whatever, but you want to make sure the product that you've produced with your sister keeps on doing something in the market.
Exactly, and I want to have growth for Double Dutch, and how that is, I don't really mind. I just want to be part of that journey and keep Double Dutch growing. Yeah.
Amazing. So what does the future look like for you guys? And are you entering your 11th year, or are you already in your?
We are entering our 10th year.
10th year. Yeah. Fantastic. So what does that kind of look like for you guys?
Growing distribution. And for this year, very much focusing just on UK hospitality, more groups in UK hospitality, driving our brand awareness here.
Yeah.
And in export, we are building our core markets. We have a big rebrand coming up in the middle of the year, which is very exciting. Super premium new bottle.
Yeah.
So some exciting, a few new flavors in the pipeline. So some exciting future.
Is that one of the kind of favorite parts for you, the product development stuff?
I think product development is super fun, and the tastings around it. And I think the it's fun. I think selling and kind of winning, like the small new wins, are amazing as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the final question for me is, what does it take to build a brand like Double Dutch?
Persistence.
Is that really, that would be your call out, is persistence?
Yeah, I do think for any kind of company, I think you just need persistence and lots of passion, because especially in the beginning years, there's so many things you have to give up, or like stupid things like a Christmas or a best friend's birthday, or those kind of things. And I think if you don't enjoy what you do and you don't love, and you absolutely love your job, then it just becomes annoying, and otherwise you don't care, and it's a nice thing to do.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, best friend.
For sure. Raissa, thank you so much. It's been lovely to hear your story, and I can't believe we've been for over an hour, but it's been great to hear what you've been doing for the last 10 years. And congratulations, because you started with just 6,000 bottles in a shed, and now you're doing 2.5 million cans and very much shotting the course to take over the space. So congratulations to you and your sister and the team. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what's in store for you in the next 10 years. Let's see where you end up. But thanks for giving us some time and sharing all your insights. And best luck for the future.
Thank you very much.
So much.
You too.